According to the Quran, all of its contents, including its words, are considered to be heavenly in origin and not derived from any earthly sources. The belief that the Quran was sent down, as we read in Surah 2:185, also confirms its heavenly source. This is further corroborated by the belief that the Quran cannot be imitated either in its individual surahs or in its verses or ayat. Moreover, the Quran is also believed, according to classical Islam, to be the eternal word of Allah, which is preserved in the heavenly tablet, as Surah 85, verse 21 points out. But what does the evidence in the Quran actually show? Are the sources of the Quran heavenly in nature, as the Quran itself claims, or are they earthly in nature, having a human source instead? I'm going to argue tonight that the sources of the Quran are in fact human in origin, and that the writer or writers of the Quran were well aware of this charge. In fact, Muhammad himself was also well aware of this charge, because it was leveled against him. In Surah 25, verses 46, it states, "But the misbelievers say, not is this but a lie which he has forged, and others have helped him at it. In truth, it is they who have put forward an iniquity and a falsehood. And they say, tales of the ancients, which he has caused to be written, and they are dictated before him morning and evening. Say, the Quran was sent down by him who knows the mystery that is in the heavens and the earth. Verily, he is oft forgiving, most merciful." In Surah 68 and verse 15, it says that when our revelations are recited unto him, that is Muhammad, he says, that is, the critic, mere fables of men of old. And then in Surah 16, verses 103 and 105, we know indeed that they say it is a man that teaches him. The tongue of him that wickedly points to is notably foreign, while this is Arabic, pure and clear. It is those who believe not in the signs of God that forge falsehood. It is they who lie. However, when we look at the Quran and we look at some of its narratives, what we find is that the Quran is full of examples of using earthly sources that were very well known to the Arabs of Muhammad's day, and these sources were pre-Islamic. For instance, take the story of Cain and Abel, where Cain slays his brother Abel, and we're told in Surah 5, verse 31, that a raven was sent to teach Cain how to bury his brother. But this story was nothing new, because this story finds its sources in the Jewish writing Targum of Jonathan ben Uzziah, where he also relates in exactly the same fashion the story of the burial of Abel and a raven being sent to teach him. And this source, of course, predates the Quran. We also have in Surah 5 and Ayah 32 the statement that whoever slays a person, it's as if they slayed the whole world. Well, again, this source is not original to the Quran. It comes from the Mishnah Sanhedrin, where we have rabbinic tradition citing that very source. Other stories in the Quran that indicate that these sources are earthly in origin, for instance, is the story of Abraham breaking the idols of his father and being thrown in the fire by Nimrod, and then being delivered, as we see in Surah 21, verses 51 to 71. This story, of course, was very well known. It was contained in the rabbinic writing known as the Midrash Rabbah, where we have this story. In the Quran, in Surah 27, in verses 17 to 44, we have the story of Solomon and the Queen of Sheba, where we're told that Sheba came to Solomon's temple, and she went into his palace, and she thought that the floor of the palace was made of water, or it was water, and it says that she raised her skirt. These stories, again, predate the Quran. They are found in the Targum of Esther, a very well-known rabbinic writing, which, again, pre-existed the Quran by centuries. The story in the Quran of the scales being used on the Day of Judgment to weigh good deeds against bad deeds is attested in the Testament of Abraham, a well-known apocryphal text that predated Islam. The story in Surah 7 and verse 171 of God raising up Mount Sinai over the heads of the Jews is found in the rabbinic text known as Avodah Sarah. And we can go on and on. The seven heavens that are mentioned in the Quran are attested in the Zohar, a Jewish mystical writing that predates the Quran. The story of the angels being commanded with Iblis to bow down to Adam and worship him, which is mentioned in the Quran 7 times. This is a very well-known story that pre-existed Muhammad. It was known from the text known as the life of Adam and Eve. Christian sources, in Surah 18, verses 8 to 250, we're told about the story of the seven sleepers, This story was very well known in Christian folklore. It actually comes from the Latin work of Gregory of Tours, and it was the story known as the Seven Sleepers of Ephesus, which is a story relating to a 3rd century event where Christians went into hiding from persecution, slept in a cave for over 300 years, and then came out and realized that Christianity was triumphant. The story in Surah 3, verses 35 to 37 of Mary, the mother of Jesus, the only woman mentioned by name in the Quran, being dedicated by her mother to the temple where she was raised and fed by angels. This story was well known early on by the text known as the Protevangelium of James, a very well-known story, again, that predates the Quran. We also have the well-known story in Surah 3, Ayah 49, and Surah 100, Ayah 110, of Jesus speaking from the cradle, and also the story of Jesus making clay birds and then breathing on them, and then the birds become animated and fly off. Well, these stories, again, were very well known by Christians, and this came from the infancy gospel of Thomas, where this story is related. The story about paradise, description of paradise in Surahs 55 and 56 about the righteous being rewarded with the white-eyed hooties, all of these stories, the gardens of wine and milk and honey, these are stories that were all attested in Zoroastrian sources long before Muhammad. And so what we find here is that these sources that we see in the Quran, and I'm only covering a few of them, I'm not even dealing with the bulk of sources, but these sources, all of them clearly antedate Muhammad, they antedate the Quran, and they are clearly human sources, and therefore refutes the Islamic claim that the Quran is of heavenly origin sent down by Allah. Thank you.